John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory,
Welcome
glory, hallelujah.
to War of the Rebellion, Stories of the Civil War. I'm your host, Leon, and this is a reading of the memoir, Reminiscences of My Life in Camp with the 33rd United States Colored Troops, late 1st South Carolina Volunteers, by Susie King Taylor. Chapter 3. Next morning, we arrived at St. Simon's, and the captain told Commodore Goldsborough about this affair. And his reply was, "Captain Whitmore, you should not have allowed them to return. You should have kept them." After I had been on St. Simon's about 3 days, Commodore Goldsborough heard of me and came to Gaston Bluff to see me. I found him very cordial. He said Captain Whitmore had spoken to him of me, and that he was pleased to hear of my being so capable, etc., and wished me to take charge of a school for the children on the island. I told him I would gladly do so, if I could have some books. He said I should have them, and in a week or two I received 2 large boxes of books and the Testaments from the North. I had about 40 children to teach beside a number of adults who came to me nights, all of them so eager to learn to read above anything else. Chaplain French of Boston would come home to the school, sometimes, and lecture to the pupils on Boston and the North. About the 1st of June, we were told that there was going to be a settlement of the war. Those who were on the Union side would remain free, and those in bondage were to work 3 days for their masters, and 3 for themselves. It was a gloomy time for us all, and we were to be sent to Liberia. Chaplain French asked me, would I rather go back to Savannah, or go to Liberia? I told him the latter place by all means. We did not know when this would be, but we were prepared in this case this settlement should be reached. However, the Confederates would not agree to the arrangement, or else it was one of the many rumors flying about at that time, as we heard nothing further of the matter. There were a number of settlements on this island of St. Simon's, just like little villages, and we would go from one to the other on business, to call, or only for a walk. One Sunday, 2 men, Adam Miller and Daniel Spaulding, were chased by some rebels as they were coming from Hope Place, which was between the beach and Gaston Bluff, but the latter were unable to catch them. When they reached the beach and told this, all the men on the place, about 90, armed themselves, and the next day, Monday, with Charles O'Neill as their leader, skirmished the island for the Rebs. In a short while they discovered them in the woods, hidden behind a large log among the thick underbrush. Charles O'Neill was the first to see them, and he was killed. Also John Brown, and their bodies were never found. Charles O'Neill was an uncle of Edward King, who later was my husband and a sergeant in Company E, U.S. Infantry. Another man was shot, but not found for 3 days. On Tuesday, the 2nd day, Captain Trowbridge and some soldiers landed and assisted the skirmishers, word having been sent by the mailboat Unicus to Hilton Head. Later in the day, Commodore Goldsborough, who was in command of the naval station, landed about 300 Marines, and joined the others to oust the rebels. On Wednesday, John Baker, the man shot on Monday, was found in a terrible condition by Henry Bachelot, who carried him to the beach, where he was attended by the surgeon. He told us how, after being shot, he lay quiet for a day. On the second day he managed to reach some wild grapes growing near him. These he ate to satisfy his hunger and intense thirst. Then he crawled slowly, every movement causing agony, until he got to the side of the road. He lived only 3 months after they found him. On the second day of the skirmish, the troops captured a boat which they knew the Confederates had used to land in, and having this in their possession, the Rebs could not return, so pickets were stationed all around the island. There was an old man, Henry Capers, who had been left on one of the places by his old master, Mr. Hazard, as he was too old to carry away. These rebels went to his house in the night, and he hid them up in the loft. On Tuesday, all hands went to this man's house with a determination to burn it down. But Henry Bachelot pleaded with the men to spare it. The rebels were in hiding still, waiting a chance to get off the island. They searched his house, but neglected to go up into the loft, and in doing so, missed the rebels concealed there. Late in the night, Henry Capers gave them his boat to escape in, and they got off all right. This old man was allowed by the men in charge of the island to cut grass for his horse, and to have a boat to carry this grass to his home, and so they were not detected, our men thinking it was Capers using the boat. After Commodore Goldsborough left the island, Commodore Juden sent the old man over to the mainland and would not allow him to remain on the island. There were about 600 men, women, and children on St. Simon's, the women and children being in the majority, and we were afraid to go very far from our own quarters in the daytime, and at night even to go out of the house for a long time, although the men were on the watch all the time, for there were not any soldiers on the island, only the Marines who were on the gunboats along the coast. The rebels, knowing this, could steal by them under cover of the night, and getting on the island would capture any persons venturing out alone and carry them to the mainland. Several of the men disappeared, and as they were never heard from, we came to the conclusion they had been carried off this way. The latter part of August, 1862, Captain C.T. Trowbridge, with his brother John and Lieutenant Walker, came to St. Simon's Island from Hilton Head, by order of General Hunter, to get all the men possible to finish filling his regiment, which he had organized in March 1862. He had heard of the skirmish on this island, and was very much pleased at the bravery shown by these men. He found me at Gaston Bluff, teaching my little school, and was much interested in it. When I knew him better, I found him to be a thorough gentleman and a staunch friend to my race. Captain Trowbridge remained with us until October, when the order was received to evacuate, and so we boarded the Bend to Ford, a transport, for Beaufort, South Carolina. When we arrived in Beaufort, Captain Trowbridge and the men he had enlisted went to camp at Old Fort, which they named Camp Saxton. I was enrolled as a laundress. The first suits worn by the boys were redcoats and pants, which they disliked very much, for they said, "The rebels see us miles away." The first colored troops did not receive any pay for 18 months, and the men had to depend wholly on what they received from the commissary, established by General Saxton. A great many of these men had large families, and as they had no money to give them, their wives were obliged to support themselves and children by washing for the officers of the gunboats and the soldiers, and making cakes and pies which they sold to the boys in camp. Finally, in 1863, the government decided to give them half pay, but the men would not accept this. They wanted full pay or nothing. They preferred rather to give their services to the state, which they did until 1864, when the government granted them full pay with all the back pay due. I remember hearing Captain Heasley telling his company one day, "Boys, stand up for your full pay. I am with you, and so are all the officers." This captain was from Pennsylvania, and was a very good man. All the men liked him. N.G. Parker, our first lieutenant, was from Massachusetts. H.A. Beach was from New York. He was very delicate, and had to resign in 1864 on account of ill health. I had a number of relatives in this regiment, several uncles, some cousins, and a husband in Company E, and a number of cousins in other companies. Major Strong of this regiment started home on a furlough, but the vessel he was aboard was lost, and he never reached his home. He was one of the best officers we had. After his death, Captain C.T. Trowbridge was promoted major, August 1863, and filled Major Strong's place until December 1864, when he was promoted lieutenant colonel, which he remained until he was mustered out February 6, 1866. In February 1863, several cases of varioloid broke out among the boys, which caused some anxiety in camp. Edward Davis, of Company E, the company I was with, had it very badly. He was put into a tent apart from the rest of the men, and only the doctor and camp steward, James Cummings, were allowed to see or attend him. But I went to see this man every day, and nursed him. The last thing at night, I always went in to see that he was comfortable, but in spite of the good care and attention he received, he succumbed to the disease. I was not in the least afraid of the smallpox. I had been vaccinated, and I drank sassafras tea constantly, which kept my blood purged and prevented me from contracting this dread scourge. And no one need fear getting it, if they only will keep their blood in good condition, with this sassafras tea, and take it before going where the patient is. Chapter 4. Camp Saxton, Proclamation, and Barbecue, 1863. On the 1st of January, 1863, we held services for the purpose of listening to the reading of President Lincoln's Proclamation by Dr. W. H. Brisbane, and the presentation of two beautiful stands of colors, one from a lady in Connecticut, and the other from Reverend Mr. Cheever. The presentation speech was made by Chaplain French. It was a glorious day for us all, and we enjoyed every minute of it, and as a fitting close, the crowning event of this occasion, we had a grand barbecue. A number of oxen were roasted whole, and we had a fine feast, although not served as tastily or correctly as it would have been at home. Yet it was enjoyed with keen appetites and relish. The soldiers had a good time. They sang or shouted hurrah all through the camp, and seemed overflowing with fun and frolic until taps were sounded, when many, no doubt, dreamt of this memorable day. I had rather an amusing experience, that is. It seems amusing now, as I look back, but at the time it occurred it was a most serious one to me. When our regiment left Beaufort for Seabrook, I left some of my things with a neighbor who lived outside of the camp. After I had been at Seabrook about a week, I decided to return to Camp Saxton and get them. So one morning, with Mary Shaw, a friend who was in the company at that time, I started off. There was no way for us to get to Beaufort other than to walk, except we rode on the commissary wagon. This we did, and we reached Beaufort about 1 o'clock. We then had more than 2 miles to walk before reaching our old camp, and expected to be able to accomplish this and return in time to meet the wagon again by 3 o'clock that afternoon, and so be taken back. We failed to do this, however, for when we got to Beaufort, the wagon was gone. We did not know what to do. I did not wish to remain overnight, neither did my friend, although we might easily have stayed as both had relatives in the town. It was in the springtime, and the days were long, and as the sun looked so bright, we concluded to walk back, thinking we should reach camp before dark. So off we started, on our 10-mile tramp. We had not gone many miles, however, before we were all tired out and began to regret our undertaking. The sun was getting low, and we grew more frightened, fearful of meeting some animal or of treading on a snake on our way. We did not meet a person, and we were frightened almost to death. Our feet were so sore we could hardly walk. Finally, we took off our shoes and tried walking in our stocking feet, but this made them worse. We had gone about 6 miles when night overtook us. There we were. Nothing around us but dense woods, and as there was no house or any place to stop at, there was nothing for us to do but continue on. We were afraid to speak to each other. Meanwhile, at the camp, seeing no signs of us by dusk, they concluded we had decided to remain over until next day, and so had no idea of our plight. Imagine their surprise when we reached camp about 11 p.m. The guard challenged us. "Who comes there?" My answer was, "A friend without a countersign." He approached and saw who it was, reported, and we were admitted into the lines. They had the joke on us that night, and for a long time after would tease us, and sometimes some of the men who were on guard that night would call us deserters. They used to laugh at us, but we joined with them too, especially when we would tell them our experience on our way to camp. I did not undertake that trip again, so there was no way of getting in or out except one took the provision wagon, and there was not much dependence to be put in that returning to camp. Perhaps the driver would say 1 hour, and he might be there earlier or later. Of course, it was not his fault, as it depended when the order was filled at the commissary department. Therefore, I did not go any more until the regiment was ordered to our new camp, which was named after our hero, Colonel Shaw, who at that time was at Beaufort with his regiment, the 54th Massachusetts. I taught a great many of these comrades in Company E to read and write. When they were off duty, nearly all were anxious to learn. My husband taught some also, when it was convenient for him. I was very happy to know my efforts were successful in camp, and also felt grateful for the appreciation of my services. I gave my services willingly, for 4 years and 3 months, without receiving $1. I was glad, however, to be allowed to go with the regiment to care for the sick and afflicted comrades. Chapter 5. Military Expeditions and Life in Camp, which we will cover next week. So the notes that I wrote for this episode, it's pretty interesting. This is the first instance that we have with Susie King Taylor becoming a real part of the Union Army, so it's very interesting to see how it happened for her. But starting off as a teacher on the island for children and other people who want to learn, that's just downright heartwarming. Now, of course, the interesting rumor that she brings up about the war ending in a compromise with slaves working 3 days for themselves and then 3 days for their masters. And then I'm guessing the 7th is a day of rest. That's wild. And I'm sure at this time period, there was all sorts of crazy, wild rumors going on in every part of the country. I think back to my own military service and how quickly and fast rumors spread like wildfire. I can't imagine when you have hundreds of thousands of privates scattered all over the country, how fast the rumors are going to start going. So, including with all of the civilians that are involved in, oh my goodness, just a huge mess. Now, moving on, I went and I looked at what St. Simon looks like today. And looks like a gentrified retirement area, judging by all of the golf courses. But it does have some really interesting places on it that I'd like to visit. So I'm going to tack that one on as a place I want to visit in the future. Now, the hunt for the rebels on the island is really interesting. After looking at maps on that area, there's lots of little areas where little boats can land on the island for places where you can hide. And places where you can hide and also be hard to be found. So, oh man. An old man capers hiding them in his attic. Well, what a classic. But kicking that guy off the island, that was the right move. Let's see. Oh, I am very pleased that my Marine Corps makes an appearance during this time period. Semper Fi Devils. And, oh man, the fact that these guys didn't get paid for so long is so obnoxious. But, man, what a paycheck when they did. You just get all that money at once. Oh boy. If I was a private and I got all of my paychecks after like 2 years of service, or 3 years, I would have spent it all. I would have. So I hopefully their money management was better than mine. And Mrs. Taylor having to walk all the way back to the camp at night because she missed the wagon. And then when she gets there, they're just messing around with her, calling her a deserter. That's hilarious. And, you know, all of the sacrifice that she did and she went through, she didn't get paid for it. And I'm sure soldiers paid her for cleaning their uniforms and things like that. But the fact that she never got paid by the government for so many years of service is very heartbreaking. And it kind of shows what a resilient and strong and kind person that she is. Man. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening to this wild stories. We've wrapped up chapters 3 and 4. We'll do 5 and 6 next week. And please, by all means, if you have the ability, you like, comment, subscribe, share, leave a review, whatever it is that you can help grow the podcast. I'd greatly appreciate it. Every little bit helps, brings in new people to listen. And I want to share this with as many people as possible. So also, I do have some very interesting things coming down the pipeline outside the scope of my podcast, but it's hard to turn down when you're offered something so cool. My brain immediately said, so lucrative, but it's not lucrative at all. It's doing it for free. So anyway, when we get closer to that, I guess I will let you know. When we get closer to that, I'll let you know. All right. So anyway, stay safe, everyone. I'll see you in the next episode next week, and bye-bye.
Old John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. John Brown was a hero, undaunted, true and brave, and Kansas knew his valor when he fought her rights to save. And now, though the grass grows green above his grave, his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men so few, and frightened old Virginia till she trembled through and through. They hung him for a traitor, themselves a traitorous crew, but his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. John Brown was John the Baptist, of the Christ we are to see. Christ who of the bondman shall the liberator be. And soon throughout the sunny South the slaves shall all be free, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. The conflict that he heralded, he looked from heaven to view on the army of the Union with its flag red, white, and blue. And heaven shall sing with anthems o'er the deed they mean to do, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. Ye soldiers of freedom, then strike while strike ye may, the death blow of oppression in a better time and way. The dawn of old John Brown has brightened into day, and his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. For his soul is marching